That rationality goes out the window as soon as we get to Christianity. For whatever reason, these are sacred stories and there's a whole history behind that, as we all know. But we need to be honest with ourselves. And so Augustus had as his predecessor Alexander the Great. So if you go back to the divine birth myth of Alexander, that was the greatest name of that time of a.
Okay, so we have right here a person called Dr. Richard C. Miller, and he is on Derek Lambert's channel, which is called Mythvision. And Derek Lambert makes tons of videos claiming that the mythologies of the past are in correspondence with Christianity. So the story that is going to be told here is that supposedly Jesus's birth was very similar to the birth story of Alexander the Great through his mother, Olympias. And so he's going to go into some detail on that. And then we're going to look at exactly how these are extremely different sources of information and how the stories do not align. For example, Alexander the Great was a warrior king. He was the son of a warrior king. His mother came from a kingly line of people. Okay, so as warriors. But the difference is Jesus was the Prince of Peace. Jesus did not go to war in the same way as physical battles that Alexander the Great went into. Alexander the Great lived around the year 323, and he was thinking, he associated himself with many diviners, and he was thinking that he was actually the son of Zeus, the ancient god, the war god, Jupiter. So he was thinking he was the son of Zeus, and he thought that because of something his mother told them. Now, this is according to a legend that was perpetuated in the 1st century by a person called Plutarch. So Plutarch was born in 46 AD, and after he was born, he created a book called Greek Lives, and he talked about Alexander the Great and this legend that had been perpetuated. So let's listen to what he says, and then we're going to compare the differences between people like Philip of Macedon, Alexander the Great, Joseph, Jesus' legal father, and Jesus. And then, of course, Mary, we'll consider her and compare her against Olympias and see how these stories are actually quite different. Yes, it's true that in the ancient world, there were many people who tried to justify their kingly status by claiming that they were the sons of gods. But these were entirely different. Number one, it was the sons of gods, meaning coming out of the paganistic culture, the polytheistic culture, versus Jesus coming out of a monotheistic culture. And so we have a very different situation there. So let's listen, and then we're going to go back and we're going to do some comparisons.
Historical figure. You couldn't get any more exalted than Alexander. The Caesars all were competing with his legacy. His shadow over the Hellenistic East covered the entirety of it. And so that looming figure was always in the minds of people, especially anywhere you had the idea of ruling, conquering, being a successful leader, this kind of thing. And so everyone was, fashioning, you were measured against Alexander, and imitating Alexander was the way to power in that world. And so Augustus knew that, and that divine birth myth echoes some of the motifs that you get with Alexander's divine birth myth. Now, what I do in the book, I have an excursus where I go and say, not only is Matthew's text like that, but it mimetically is meant to follow that narrative. And so I take it a step further and say, it's deliberate. You've got the most famous guy and this guy that's not even known. And that's one of the things we need to get back to also, is that.
So again, he's already pointed out a pretty significant difference. When Jesus came onto the scene, he was unknown. He was a son of the carpenter. He was a son of Mary. And so when he came onto the scene, he had an existence where he was coming out of Nazareth. And as one of the apostles said, does anything good come out of Nazareth? He did not have a father who was a king, very powerful king in this area where he came out of. Instead, he was, again, the son of a carpenter, and legally, but he was also the biological son of God. And Jesus was part of a monotheistic culture, the Jews, and Alexander the Great, again, is part of a paganistic culture, a polytheistic culture, the Greeks.
Jesus was a nobody in that world. There were a lot of big people and big personalities, but when Christianity came on the scene, he was unknown. There was nothing there. And we project back onto his equal significance with everyone else. but that was not at all established at that point. And so, so he's competing, and he's the stories, the narratives that people are producing are in competition and trying to leverage some of those larger cultural capital forms that were already in the marketplace at that time. And so, to mimetically follow Alexander, I mean, there's not much more you can do to be more Hellenistic than that. Once you get to Matthew's divine birth myth, though, and that's a comparative study that I have in the book that I offer as almost like a bonus, I guess. Studying all in its own right, really. You really get to the bottom of what's going on there. You also have a virgin birth with Alexander. It's told a little differently, but I follow the variety of mimetic signals. And if you like, I could read it to you.
Sure.
Yeah. Let me read a section here. So this is from Plutarch. He's writing about Alexander's life here, and he's a Greek writer, a Middle Platonist, so to speak. Let me read a little bit of it.
Notice he doesn't give us the date of Plutarch, 1st century AD. He was born again in 46. Jesus was crucified in 33 AD. So Plutarch was born into a region where Jesus's situation was very well known by the time Plutarch was born, because it started to spread like wildfire all throughout the world. And it's pretty amazing when you think about this entire story. And I should say all throughout the world, all throughout the Roman Empire and the Mediterranean world. So we had very much a story with the situation going on with Jesus by the time Plutarch was even born. Certainly by the time that Plutarch might have started writing, maybe say he's 20 years old or something like that, that would put him up to around 66. And that's approaching when Jerusalem was toppled by the Romans, which occurred in 70. So Plutarch is writing around this time, and some of the things that he's writing about are recording legends that he had understood. There were multiple legends surrounding whoever was the divine situation behind Alexander the Great. He chose this one particular legend. Alexander was a good friend of a lot of sorcerers. Alexander the Great's mother, Olympias, also was a devout snake worshiper. Okay, she was in the cult Dionysus, a snake worshiping cult, interestingly enough. She also was one of 7 wives of Philip. Now, that's very much unlike. We only have Mary and Joseph, the monogamous group, and we got a polygamous group here coming in with Philip. He divorced Olympias at some point. He ended up being assassinated. So again, not at all. Alexander the Great ended up dying in mysterious ways. It's unknown exactly what disease he had, but when he was very young, in the midst of his conquering, he developed a disease. And so that's a little different. Mary was conceived immaculately. So she was conceived immaculately under Anne and Joachim. And they knew she was very special at a very young age. And so by the time she was 4, they realized that she was so special, they were going to bring her to the temple and leave her there. And she was going to be taken care of by people in the temple. She made sacrifices. She prayed a lot. And then at the age of 14, the angel Gabriel approached her and he said to her, "Hail, full of grace." Okay, so kakaratomene. Okay, so he said that, and she was bewildered by how that phrase, instead of naming her Hail Mary, he said, "Hail, full of grace." He named her by her title. She was full of grace. And so that's also a hint towards this immaculate conception that she had. They chose that, this is before that she had been selected. Joseph was selected to be her spouse, and Joseph was probably around 33 and she was probably around 14. Joseph was selected because he had a flowering staff. And you'll recall a flowering staff going back to the Exodus and Moses during that time. Some people say that Mary was not a perpetual virgin, but that doesn't make sense when you listen to what she said to the angel Gabriel. Now, she had been betrothed to Joseph. This means that she was promised, she was engaged to Joseph. So as a young woman, she would know how it could be when the angel Gabriel said, "You're going to give birth to the ruler of the world." She said, "How can this be?" Because she had taken a vow of perpetual virginity. And that's why she said that. And so she said, "Because I know not man." And that's another situation. So some have made the argument that no, Mary definitely was not a perpetual virgin, because in one of the Gospels, it says that she consummated the marriage, or she did not consummate the marriage until she had given birth. But the word for until is a Greek word, heos, which does not imply a change in condition. It's the same word that's used when Jesus say, I will be with you until the end of the age. It doesn't mean, it means even at the end of the age rather than until. Until is kind of not a very good English translation, unfortunately. But anyway, so we're going to listen. We heard a little bit about Mary's side of the story. We know that, again, she was without sin. She was in a monogamous culture, and this is very dissimilar to what this particular story is. So let's keep listening.
So that Alexander, with regard to his lineage, on his father's side, was a descendant of Heracles through Coronis, and on his mother's side was a descendant of Icus through Neoptolemus, is among those things entirely trusted. It is said that Philip, after being initiated into the mysteries of Samothrace, together with Olympias, and while he was but a youth and an orphan, fell in love with her and so betrothed her. Having persuaded her mother Arambus, then the night before they were to consummate the marriage, the bride thought, while there was lightning, that thunderbolt had fallen upon her womb. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
No one's having sex. That it had fallen upon her womb. From the blow, a fire was ignited. Thereby, as it broke into flames, the fire scattered in all directions. Later, after the wedding, Philip saw himself in a dream placing a signet, a stamp, like a ring, impression on his wife's womb. Hadn't been opened. The emblem of the signet, as it seemed, had an image of a lion. In other words, she's still a virgin. While the other diviners were distrusting the vision, namely that they needed a more careful guard of Philip, of those who had attended the wedding, Aristander and Talmesas, said that she had conceived a man. For nothing seals those things that are empty, and that she conceived a child who was courageous and as a lion by nature. There then appeared a serpent as Olympias slept, stretched out alongside her body. They say that this.
Let's not forget that she, again, as I mentioned before, she was a devout snake worshiper. Okay, so that is absolutely different from Mother Mary. Mother Mary was, again, pure in heart, perfect as far as virtue, perfect in every single way, and not like this woman. So here we go.
This most of all quenched Philip's love and fondness of her, such that with her he did not often have sexual relations as he lay with her, either because he feared that some of his wife's spells and enchantments may come upon him, or because he avoided the curse of intercourse, since she was joined to one greater than himself.
So this is the idea. He's trying to make comparisons because of this sort of strange idea. Now, what it was Olympias wanted to encourage Alexander the Great to be very brave in war. And so she gave him this story that she basically made up about herself. And so that's a rather unfortunate thing. But it's not very similar to Jesus' story. We have, of course, when Mary said, how can this be? The angel Gabriel said, the Holy Spirit will overshadow you. And the word for overshadow goes back into the Old Testament. It happened with the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant had been overshadowed by the Holy Spirit. And the idea of being overshadowed as an Ark of the Covenant is Mother Mary. And so we also can bring that forward to Revelation 11, where in the sky, the Ark of the Covenant appears. And right after that, the woman clothed with the sun who gives birth to the ruler of the world appears. That's, of course, Mary. And she's queened. She's crowned as the queen of heaven. And so that's a pretty important thing. Again, very different from the story of Philip, who was, again, a polygamist, 7 wives. He was assassinated. Philip was assassinated. Alexander died of mysterious causes. And so just a very different situation. But he's trying to, the bottom line with Mythvision here is he's trying to say that because in the ancient world there were these different kinds of beliefs about the gods and that sort of thing, that it's crafted from Christianity, that Christianity was created to be in alignment with some of these ancient beliefs surrounding gods and virgins and all of that kind of stuff. But there's so many differences between these two stories that this comparison seems rather ludicrous as far as I'm concerned. So if you like this kind of content, please like, subscribe, and do come again. This is S.J. Thomason with Truth Matters at Christian-apologist.com. So remember, if you like it, please subscribe. As I mentioned, share with your friends. And whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for God's glory. Thank you so much.